What could a homeless man possibly inherit that would make wealthy people nervous? Cole Bennett does not know the answer when he steps into a quiet attorney's office on the Maine coast with everything he owns packed into a weathered canvas bag and a German shepherd walking beside him. At 38, Cole still carries the posture of the Navy SEAL he once was, tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cut brown hair, pale skin weathered by years of salt, sun, and cold, and gray eyes that have learned to reveal very little. His jacket is clean but worn thin at the cuffs. His boots have seen better winters. Atlas, his 6-year-old German shepherd, moves close to his left leg, dark sable coat brushed neatly despite their circumstances, amber eyes quietly measuring the room. Around a polished walnut table sit people Cole has not seen in years. Expensive watches, tailored coats, the faint smell of coffee and leather. His uncle Walter Bennett is dead, and this gathering is about what remains. Houses are named, investment accounts, a boat, parcels of coastal land. Cole listens without expectation. Walter had barely spoken to him since Cole left the Navy. Then attorney Henry Mercer adjusts his glasses and reads the final line. Blackridge Island, including all structures and remaining property thereon, passes in full to Cole Bennett. Silence holds for half a second. Then someone laughs. Cole's cousin Preston leans back in his chair, unable to hide his grin. Blackridge? Seriously? Another relative shakes her head. Everyone knows the island. 12 rocky acres several miles offshore, an abandoned lighthouse, a rotting cottage, no utility connection, and a dock that storms have been chewing apart for decades. Guess Walter found a home for the homeless one, Preston says. Cole looks at him, but there is no anger in his face. He has heard worse things from better men. Atlas shifts closer until his shoulder touches Cole's knee. That small pressure is enough. Henry Mercer does not laugh. Instead, he reaches beneath the table and removes a narrow wooden box, dark with age. Your uncle left this specifically for you. Cole opens it. Inside rests an old brass key, its surface dulled, almost brown. Atlas rises immediately. His ears lift. He steps forward and smells the box, then the key, once, twice, with unusual concentration. Cole notices. So does Mercer. Beneath the key lies a folded piece of paper bearing Walter's handwriting. Only 7 words are written there. Trust the dog where men see nothing. Cole reads them again. Across the table, the laughter has stopped. Preston's smile fades for just an instant before returning. It is a tiny change, but Cole spent too many years noticing tiny changes to ignore one now. He closes his fingers around the brass key. It is cold and heavier than it looks. Outside, gulls cry above the harbor while fog drifts between fishing boats and the Atlantic rolls gray beyond the windows. Cole came here expecting nothing. By sunset, he owns an island everyone insists is worthless. And beside him, Atlas keeps staring at the key as though somewhere across those cold miles of water, something has been waiting for them. By late afternoon, the harbor has nearly disappeared behind a curtain of silver fog when Cole Bennett steps onto a 20-foot rental skiff with Atlas beside him and the old brass key tucked safely inside his jacket. The crossing costs more than Cole wants to spend, but Blackridge Island is the first place in months where no landlord can ask for rent and no stranger can tell him to move along before sunrise. The small boat pushes through 4 miles of cold Atlantic water, its engine humming beneath the cries of gulls and the steady slap of waves against the hull. Atlas stands near Cole, paws planted wide, dark sable fur lifting in the wind. Cole watches the shoreline fade behind them. For years, home has meant temporary rooms, borrowed couches, shelters, and eventually the aging truck where he and Atlas learned how little 2 souls truly need to survive. When Blackridge finally emerges through the fog, it does not look like an inheritance. It looks forgotten. 12 rocky acres rise from the gray water beneath wind-bent spruce trees and tall grass gone brown with the season. At the western edge stands the lighthouse, white paint peeling from its stone tower, its lantern dark against the evening sky. Farther inland sits a small cottage with a sagging porch and cedar shingles bleached almost colorless by decades of salt. The dock complains beneath Cole's boots when they arrive. Atlas jumps onto the weathered boards and immediately lifts his nose. Well, buddy, Cole murmurs, looking toward the cottage. It is not much. Atlas glances back at him. Cole gives the faintest smile. But nobody can make us leave. Inside, the cottage smells of dust, old pine, and ocean damp. There is a narrow bed, a cast-iron stove, a kitchen table scarred by years of use, and a faded photograph of Walter standing beside the lighthouse when he was young. Cole finds dry firewood stacked beneath a canvas sheet behind the house. By dusk, orange flames glow inside the stove, warming the single room while rain begins tapping softly against the windows. Cole divides the last of his dinner, giving Atlas a piece of chicken before settling into an old chair. For the first time in weeks, he does not need to wonder where they will sleep tomorrow night. The thought should bring relief. Instead, he remembers Walter's note. Trust the dog where men see nothing. Cole reaches into his pocket and turns the brass key between his fingers. Across the room, Atlas is staring at it. You know something I do not? Cole asks quietly. Atlas tilts his head, then settles beside the stove. Hours later, Cole wakes to silence. The fire has burned low. Rain whispers against the roof. Atlas is gone. Cole sits upright, pulls on his boots, and steps outside into the cold darkness. Atlas. Nothing. Then he sees him. Nearly 200 yards away, beneath the dead lighthouse, Atlas sits perfectly still in the wet grass. Cole walks toward him through the mist, flashlight trembling across stone and weeds. Atlas does not turn when Cole approaches. His amber eyes remain fixed on the sealed lighthouse door. Cole reaches into his jacket. The brass key is suddenly warm from his hand. He looks at the rusted lock beneath the beam of his flashlight, then down at Atlas. The German shepherd finally looks up at him, waiting. The lock should not have opened. Years of salt had crusted the iron around it, and the lighthouse door looked as though the Atlantic itself had tried to seal it shut. Yet when Cole slides Walter's brass key into the narrow keyway, the mechanism turns with one heavy click. Atlas rises immediately. Cole pushes the door inward, releasing a breath of cold air carrying the scent of stone, rust, and old seawater. His flashlight sweeps across a circular room covered in dust. A narrow staircase coils upward into darkness. Nothing waits inside except an overturned chair, empty shelves, and decades of silence. Cole looks at Atlas. This is what you dragged me out of bed for. The German shepherd ignores him. His nose stays low as he circles the room once, then returns outside. Cole follows. Rain has weakened to a mist, and beyond the lighthouse the ocean moves like black glass beneath the clouds. Atlas walks along the stone foundation, stops near a patch of tall grass, smells the ground, moves 3 feet farther, then returns. His ears sharpen. One paw scrapes the wet earth. Cole watches carefully. What did you find? Atlas digs again. Not wildly. Deliberately. Soil gathers behind his paws until something metallic catches Cole's flashlight. He kneels and clears the mud with his fingers. A chain emerges first, darkened by age. At its end hangs a military identification tag. Cole becomes still. He wipes it against his sleeve and reads the name stamped into the metal. Daniel Mercer. The name means nothing to him. Beneath it are faded service details, old enough that Cole knows this tag has been buried for decades. He turns it over. 3 groups of numbers have been scratched into the back by hand. Not part of the original identification. Cole studies them. Atlas sits beside him, breathing softly in the mist. Something about the spacing feels familiar. Then Cole sees it. During his years as a Navy SEAL, coordinates were more than numbers. They were destinations, extraction points, places you remembered because someone depended on you reaching them. These numbers have been written in a crude version of the same language. Cole stands and looks across Blackridge. The lighthouse rises behind him. The cottage glows faintly through the trees nearly 200 yards away. He takes out his phone. There is barely enough signal to load the island map, but when he enters the numbers, the marker lands nowhere near the lighthouse. It falls on the northern side of Blackridge, beyond the spruce trees, near a section of rocky shoreline Cole has not explored. He looks back at the tag. Daniel Mercer. Walter's note returns to him with uncomfortable clarity. Trust the dog where men see nothing. Atlas suddenly turns toward the distant cottage. His body stiffens. Cole hears it a moment later, faint beneath the wind. An engine. Not from the island. From the water. A small light moves through the fog offshore, then disappears. Cole waits, listening, but the sound slowly fades into the Atlantic night. Maybe it is a fishing boat. Maybe nothing at all. Still, he closes his fist around the old tag. When he looks down, Atlas is no longer watching the sea. The German shepherd is staring north, toward the coordinates, as though the first thing they found was never meant to be the answer. It was meant to show them where to look next. Morning comes quietly to Blackridge, carrying a pale strip of sunlight over the Atlantic and the smell of wet spruce through the cracked cottage window. Cole has barely finished boiling coffee on the old stove when Atlas lifts his head from beside the door. A low engine grows across the water. This time, it does not pass. Cole steps onto the porch and sees a white cabin cruiser approaching the broken dock, polished enough to look out of place against the weathered island. A man in a navy overcoat steps ashore without waiting for an invitation. He is somewhere in his early 50s, silver at the temples, clean-shaven, with the relaxed confidence of someone accustomed to doors opening before he reaches them. "Cole Bennett," he calls. Cole remains on the porch. Atlas stands beside him, silent. "Depends who is asking." The man smiles. "Grant Holloway. Holloway Coastal Development." He climbs the path and offers his hand. Cole takes it once, briefly. Grant looks past him toward the cottage, then toward the trees. "Walter and I spoke occasionally. Difficult man. He had that reputation." Grant laughs softly. "I heard about the inheritance. I thought I might save you some trouble." From inside his coat, he removes an envelope and places it on the porch rail. $25,000 for Blackridge. Cash purchase. Closing costs covered. Cole looks at the envelope but does not touch it. $25,000 is more money than he has seen in one place for a long time. Enough for an apartment deposit. Repairs on his truck. Food without counting every dollar. A bed that does not belong to a shelter, a motel, or a dead relative. Grant seems to recognize the hesitation. This place is 12 acres of rock and maintenance. No power grid. No reliable freshwater system. That lighthouse alone could become a financial headache. Atlas steps forward. Not aggressively. Just close enough that Grant notices him. "Beautiful dog," Grant says. "German shepherd?" "Yes." Grant looks back at Cole. 30,000. Cole's eyes narrow slightly. "You just offered 25. I like simple deals. Then why are you negotiating against yourself?" The smile on Grant's face weakens. Wind moves through the spruce branches behind them. Somewhere below, water knocks against the old dock. Grant slips his hands into his coat pockets. "Walter refused every reasonable offer I made. Sentimental attachment, I suppose. There is nothing here worth holding on to." Cole studies him. "Then you should not mind if I do." For the first time, Grant looks irritated. It lasts only a moment. 40,000. Think about it. He turns toward the dock, then pauses. His gaze travels across the island and settles beyond the trees. "That old lighthouse will cost you more than you expect." Cole says nothing. Grant walks away. Only after the cruiser disappears into the morning haze does Cole realize what feels wrong. He never mentioned the lighthouse. Neither did the attorney. Cole picks up the unopened envelope and watches the empty water. Atlas has already turned away. The German shepherd is facing north, toward the coordinates scratched into Daniel Mercer's tag. Cole slips the tag into his pocket. "All right," he says softly. "Show me." Atlas moves into the trees, and Cole follows, leaving Grant's offer unopened on the porch. Atlas moves through the spruce trees with the quiet certainty of an animal following something older than scent. Cole stays several yards behind, pushing through wet branches while Daniel Mercer's identification tag rests against his palm inside his jacket pocket. The coordinates lead them across the northern ridge, where the ground drops toward a narrow inlet hidden from the cottage and lighthouse. There, between two walls of dark granite, Atlas stops. At first Cole sees nothing unusual, just stone, seagrass, and driftwood silvered by years of weather. Then Atlas lowers his nose beside a cluster of rocks and begins scratching at the earth. Cole kneels. Beneath a layer of moss, his fingers find iron. A small ring has been set into a flat slab almost perfectly disguised by the ground around it. "Walter," Cole whispers. He pulls. The slab resists, then slowly lifts enough to reveal a shallow compartment cut into the rock. Inside sits a metal box wrapped in brittle canvas. No gold. No cash. Nothing that looks valuable at all. Cole carries it into the weak morning light and opens the corroded latch. The first thing he sees is a photograph. Walter is young in it, perhaps 30, standing beside the Blackridge lighthouse with 4 other men and a German shepherd. Everyone is smiling. The dog sits proudly at Walter's side, ears high, dark saddle bright beneath the summer sun. Cole turns the photograph over. 5 names are written in faded ink. One stops him cold. Daniel Mercer. Beneath the names is another line. Blackridge Recovery Project, 1987. Atlas nudges Cole's wrist. Cole lifts the next item. A thick envelope containing property surveys, old letters, and copies of legal records. At the bottom lies a handwritten note addressed simply to Cole. His uncle's familiar handwriting trembles slightly across the page. Cole reads only the first lines before his breath catches. Blackridge was never meant to make anyone rich. It was meant to give good men somewhere to become themselves again. Cole looks toward the photograph. Walter's German Shepherd has a name written beneath one paw. Atlas. For several seconds, the only sound is the ocean moving against the rocks. Cole looks at his dog. You have got to be kidding me. Atlas gives him the patient stare he always uses when Cole is slow to understand something. A faint smile reaches Cole's face, but it disappears when he examines the property records more closely. Several parcels are marked in red. Dates have been altered. Signatures repeat where different names should appear. And stamped across one faded development proposal is a company name Cole recognizes immediately. Holloway Coastal Holdings. The document is more than 20 years old. Grant had not discovered Blackridge recently. His connection to the island existed long before Walter died. Cole gathers the papers carefully and returns them to the box. Atlas suddenly noses beneath the photograph and pushes something loose. A smaller sealed envelope slides into view. On its front, Walter has written 4 words. For whoever finds this. Cole opens it. Inside is a single sentence. The first box explains why they want the island. The lighthouse explains what they are afraid of. By noon, the sky above Blackridge has turned the color of old steel, and Cole carries Walter's metal box back to the cottage with Atlas walking close beside him. He spreads the papers across the scarred kitchen table, placing coffee mugs on the corners to keep the ocean breeze from lifting them. What first looked like forgotten paperwork slowly becomes a history someone had tried to erase. Blackridge Recovery Project began in 1987, founded by Walter Bennett, Daniel Mercer, and 3 other veterans who believed returning home was sometimes harder than leaving it. The island offered privacy, simple work, open air, and something the old photographs make impossible to miss. Dogs. German Shepherds beside men repairing the dock. German Shepherds sleeping beneath picnic tables. German Shepherds walking along the shore with veterans whose smiles seem uncertain at first, then stronger in later photographs. Cole finds letters thanking Walter for giving men and retired working dogs a place where neither had to explain why silence sometimes felt safer than conversation. He stops reading for a moment. Atlas rests his chin against Cole's knee. Cole runs one hand behind the dog's ear. Sounds familiar, does it not? Atlas closes his eyes. Then Cole reaches the later records. The warmth disappears. During the 1990s, coastal developers begin approaching Walter. Survey maps describe Blackridge as commercially valuable because of its sheltered northern inlet and proximity to the mainland shipping route. One company appears repeatedly, Holloway Coastal Holdings. The earliest letter bears the name of Grant's father, Charles Holloway. Later documents show boundary adjustments, disputed access rights, and transfers Walter challenged for years. Several signatures appear nearly identical. Dates conflict. One survey removes almost 3 acres from Blackridge without explanation. Another lists the recovery project as abandoned years before photographs prove it was still operating. Cole leans back, gray eyes fixed on the papers. This was never about an old cottage. Someone had spent decades making Blackridge look smaller, emptier, and less important than it really was. His phone catches enough signal near the window for a call. Henry Mercer answers after the second ring. Cole asks about Daniel Mercer. Silence follows. He was my father, Henry finally says. Cole looks toward the identification tag on the table. Henry explains that Daniel served with Walter and helped establish the retreat, but after Daniel died, the project slowly faded from public memory. Walter kept fighting to preserve the island. Henry's voice lowers. Cole, if you found records Walter hid, do not sell anything. Not yet. Cole glances toward the lighthouse through the rain-streaked window. Grant Holloway offered $40,000 this morning. Another silence. Then he knows Walter left you more than land. The call ends as the wind strengthens outside. Cole gathers the documents into the box, but Atlas suddenly rises and walks to the door. His ears point toward the lighthouse. Rain begins striking the roof harder. Cole remembers Walter's final sentence. The lighthouse explains what they are afraid of. He slips the brass key into his pocket. You were right the first time, buddy. Atlas is already waiting outside. Together they cross the wet grass toward the dark tower, while far beyond Blackridge, thunder rolls over the Atlantic. The storm reaches the lighthouse before Cole does. Rain sweeps sideways across Blackridge, turning the grass silver beneath flashes of distant lightning, while Atlas moves through the weather with his nose low and his ears fixed forward. Cole unlocks the tower and pushes inside. The old door groans shut behind them, muting the wind to a hollow moan through the stone walls. His flashlight travels over the circular room they searched the night before. Dust, empty shelves, the overturned chair, the spiral staircase rising toward the dark lantern room. Nothing has changed, yet Atlas does not look upward. He walks beneath the staircase and stops beside the lowest stone step. Cole watches him smell along the floor, move away, then return to exactly the same place. There is nothing there, buddy. Atlas scratches once at the narrow seam between two stones. Cole kneels. At first it looks like ordinary mortar, but when he brushes away decades of dirt, he finds a thin iron edge. A small rectangular plate has been fitted into the floor beneath the staircase. There is no handle, no visible lock. Cole runs his fingers along it until he feels a shallow opening barely wide enough for the tip of the brass key. He inserts Walter's key. A click answers from somewhere below. The plate lifts less than an inch. Beneath it sits a narrow wooden compartment sealed with waxed canvas. Cole pulls out a long document tube, surprisingly dry despite the damp tower. Atlas settles beside him as thunder rolls over the ocean. Inside the tube is a deed. Not a copy. The original paper is thick and yellowed, carrying embossed seals, handwritten signatures, and the name Blackridge Veterans and Working Dog Trust. Cole reads slowly. Walter Bennett and Daniel Mercer had not simply created a private retreat. They had placed the island into a trust designed to protect its purpose beyond their own lifetimes. Blackridge could remain under a designated caretaker, but if that caretaker chose to continue the original mission, the land could not be divided for private development. It could not be stripped into luxury parcels. It could not become another piece of coastline sold to the highest bidder. Cole reaches the final pages. Attached are surveys matching the island's original 12 acres, along with notarized records that contradict the altered documents he found that morning. Suddenly, the missing acres make sense. So does Grant's urgency. The worthless island is not worthless at all. Its sheltered inlet, coastal access, and protected acreage make it valuable. But the original deed makes something else more valuable than the land itself. The truth. Cole sits on the cold stone floor while rain drums above him. For months, he has measured life in small numbers. Dollars left for fuel. Nights he could afford a motel. Meals divided carefully between necessity and tomorrow. Now a choice rests in his hands. He could refuse the trust's mission, pursue a sale, and perhaps never sleep in his truck again. No more wondering where he and Atlas will be allowed to stay. No more being looked through like a man who disappeared while still breathing. Atlas leans against his shoulder. Cole looks down at him. Then at the old photograph he carried from the cottage, Walter standing beside another German shepherd named Atlas all those years ago. Two men, two dogs, two different generations arriving at the same quiet question. What is a home worth if keeping it can give someone else one? Cole notices another folded page inside the tube. Walter's handwriting fills only a few lines. I do not know what life will have taken from you by the time this reaches your hands. I only know what this island once gave back to men who thought they had nothing left. Do not keep Blackridge for me. Decide what it should become for yourself. Cole closes his eyes. For a moment, the storm outside seems very far away. Then Atlas stands and places one paw gently across the edge of the deed. Cole lets out a tired laugh. Subtle as ever. He carefully rolls the documents back into the tube. When they step outside, the rain has begun to soften. Across the dark water, a white light appears near the southern shore. A boat is approaching Blackridge again. Cole watches it grow brighter through the mist. This time, he already knows who has come to make him an offer. Grant Holloway arrives before the rain has fully stopped. His white cruiser settles beside the damaged dock. and this time he does not come alone. A woman in a charcoal coat steps onto the island behind him carrying a leather portfolio, but Grant does all the talking. Cole waits near the cottage with Atlas at his side. The original deed secured inside Walter's metal box beneath the kitchen floorboards. Grant walks up the path as though the island already belongs to him. I decided 40,000 was unfair, he says. You inherited a problem. I can make it disappear. The woman opens her portfolio and removes several documents. Grant places them on the porch rail. $250,000. Clean sale. You can be on the mainland tonight with enough money to start over. Cole looks at the number. For a moment, he sees everything it could buy. A warm apartment. A reliable truck. Food without checking the price first. A place where Atlas could sleep beside a heater instead of beneath a borrowed blanket. $250,000 could put distance between Cole and every night he spent wondering where morning would find him. Grant watches his face and mistakes silence for surrender. Walter held on to this place because he was sentimental. You do not have that luxury. Cole lifts his eyes. You knew about the lighthouse. Grant's expression changes almost imperceptibly. Everyone around here knows the lighthouse. You also knew Blackridge was worth more than $40,000. The woman beside Grant looks toward him, but says nothing. Cole continues. Your father knew it too. Now the smile disappears. Wind carries the smell of wet cedar from the trees. Atlas remains still, amber eyes fixed on Grant. I found the original surveys, Cole says, and the trust deed. The silence that follows feels heavier than the storm. Grant looks toward the lighthouse, then back at Cole. Those documents are old. Things change. Signatures do not change. Cole folds the purchase agreement once and places it back on the rail. Neither do 12 acres. Grant exhales slowly. 300,000. Cole almost smiles. There it is. Proof without confession. The island becomes more valuable every time Cole refuses to sell it. No. Grant studies him as though trying to understand how a man with almost nothing can turn away from so much. But Cole understands something Grant does not. Being poor taught him the difference between needing money and letting money decide who he becomes. By evening, Henry Mercer has digital copies of every record Cole found. Within days, the original deed reaches a coastal property attorney and the disputed surveys are submitted for formal review. Questions that slept for decades begin waking up. Old filings are reopened. Altered boundaries are challenged. Holloway Coastal Holdings withdraws its purchase offer before the week is over. Cole does not celebrate. He simply sits on the cottage porch as sunset breaks through the clouds, turning the Atlantic copper and gold. Atlas lies beside his boots. Cole rests one hand on the German shepherd's shoulder. Could have bought you a lot of steaks with that money. Atlas looks up at him. Cole smiles. Yeah, I know. Behind them, the cottage still leaks. The dock still needs work. The lighthouse is still dark. Cole is still a man with very little in his bank account. But for the first time in years, very little does not feel like nothing. 1 year later, the lighthouse shines again. Its beam turns slowly across the Atlantic on a clear October evening, sweeping over 12 rocky acres that no longer look forgotten. The old dock has been rebuilt with weathered cedar and strong new pilings. The cottage roof no longer leaks. 2 additional cabins stand among the spruce trees, modest and warm, their windows glowing against the blue dusk. Near the path from the dock, a wooden sign bears words Cole once thought he would never see anywhere connected to his name: Blackridge Veterans and K-9 Retreat. The legal review took months, but the original trust deed held. The disputed boundaries were restored, the altered records were corrected, and Blackridge remained whole. Cole never became rich. He did something stranger. He stayed. Donations arrived after Henry Mercer helped tell the story of Walter, Daniel, and the Forgotten Recovery Project. Local veterans volunteered lumber, tools, boats, and weekends. A retired electrician restored power to the lighthouse. A carpenter from Portland repaired the cottage and refused payment. Someone mailed a box containing an old photograph of Walter and Daniel standing beside the first atlas, taken on this same shore nearly 40 years earlier. Cole keeps it above the fireplace now. On this evening, 3 veterans sit near a small fire overlooking the water. Nobody asks them to explain why they came. One drinks coffee in silence while an elderly German shepherd sleeps against his boot. Another throws a tennis ball for a retired working dog that moves more slowly than it once did, but still returns every time with proud eyes. Cole understands that sometimes healing begins when nobody demands that you call it healing. Atlas trots down the path from the lighthouse, his dark sable coat catching the last amber light. He is carrying something in his mouth. Cole laughs when the dog drops Walter's old work glove at his feet, stolen again from the cottage table. You know that is not yours. Atlas sits. His expression suggests otherwise. Cole bends and scratches behind his ears. A year ago, these hands held everything he owned inside one canvas bag. Tonight, the brass key to Blackridge rests in his pocket, not as proof that he owns the island, but as a reminder that someone trusted him with it before he knew how to trust himself. Cole walks toward the shoreline. Atlas follows without command. Behind them, quiet voices drift from the cabins. The lighthouse beam passes overhead, disappears across the water, then returns. Cole takes Daniel Mercer's old identification tag from his pocket. He still carries it on difficult days. The metal has been cleaned, but the scratches remain. So do the coordinates that brought him here. Atlas settles beside him, shoulder against his leg. Cole looks toward the mainland, barely visible beneath the evening sky. Somewhere beyond that horizon are people who once laughed because a homeless man inherited something they believe had no value. Cole no longer thinks about them. The island was never waiting to make him wealthy. It was waiting for someone who understood what it meant to be overlooked. The wind moves softly through Atlas's fur. Cole rests his hand on the dog's back as the lighthouse turns once more through the gathering dark. Neither of them had found the life they expected. Somehow, on 12 forgotten acres surrounded by cold Atlantic water, they had found something better. A place to stay, a reason to remain, and enough light to help the next lost soul find the shore.